Right, so back with another video. Today I'm going to talk about the recent increase in violence over the past few months, directed at women who were survivors of domestic violence. So in the past few months, there have been several murders of women in Michigan and near the Detroit area in particular, where exes that they were with who were abusive have come back and killed them. So we have Patrice Wilson, a nurse, 29-year-old woman who was shot and killed leaving work. She was kidnapped by her ex and then shot and killed. We have a woman who was in a hotel parking lot with her new boyfriend, and the ex found them and shot both of them, and the woman died. There was another woman who was trying to flee a relationship. She was getting out of her car, broad daylight, with her daughter in the back seat, and she was shot and killed, broad daylight in a parking lot. And now this more recent case. Oh, actually, I forgot about the director of the Oakland County Health Department, I think it was. She was murdered by her husband in a suicide murder. Like, he killed her and then killed himself. And now this, a woman who, again, was at work and going on break, and her ex shot and killed her. So I wanted to make a video on this months ago, and so I just want to put that out there because this is like my area of expertise, and I want to be clear as to why I haven't put this out. I've actually made multiple videos on this over the past couple months, but it was so emotionally overwhelming for me, as I am a survivor of domestic violence, and so therefore these stories of these women hit home. And as someone who has been in that situation myself, it's a pretty terrifying thing to see other women around your same age who are being murdered by abusive partners and exes. It really, leaves you, it has left me feeling a lot less safe in the world, and I don't know, it's just challenging to wrap your head around or to process, especially when these women are, like I said, close to my age. They're not that far from where I live. It just is kind of overwhelming to to basically look at these women and be like, that could be me, or that could have been me. And so that is why I have not put any of those videos out, because I think the other part of it is that I was trying to come up with solutions and kind of explain different ways of approaching leaving an abusive person. And then that became challenging because I didn't want to send the message that it was these women's fault, what happened to them. Like, it's not like, they should have done XYZ and that would have saved their life. No. My point in wanting to make the previous videos I was making was to utilize these experiences of these women to help educate other survivors so that they can like protect themselves. But I think it's challenging because there is no black and white answer. There is no guaranteed solution that is going to protect a woman who has been a survivor of abuse. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention Winter Cole Smith's mother, who was stabbed in Lansing, Michigan by her ex, and then her baby was murdered by her ex. So that's another encounter of this. And so I think there's so many that have happened that it's just hard to take in. So, and I think the other thing that's challenging, like I said, is there is no right or wrong, or there is no black and white answer to this. Yes, there are some things that some of these women, I may have advised them of doing that could have maybe prevented further escalation. One of the things I said in my previous video, and again, everybody has their own way of going about things, so I think following your intuition is what's most important. But like, one of the things that I mentioned is involving the police is not always the best idea. In fact, sometimes it can make the abuser escalate and put you in more danger. Because what people need to understand is that abusers are trying to uphold a certain image. And that image is directly tied in with their ego. And it's a false sense of self, so it's very fragile. So that if that is exposed, that can lead a narcissistic person, an abusive person, to escalate, to protect, not to protect, but because it triggers them, and they may feel powerless once they're exposed, even more powerless once they're exposed. So there was a woman who had called the cops, and there was like a body cam video, and she like called the cops and had the cops get the guy out of her house and all this other shit. And again, I mean, it's challenging because as a survivor of domestic violence, you want to, you think that that's the right thing to do. Well, let me call the cops and go this route and try to get protection and whatever. And I think a lot of times, I think one of the most important things is getting inside the mind of the abuser and really understanding how they view things and how their mind works. And that is going to be the most beneficial thing that you can utilize to protect yourself from them, is thinking like them, thinking like how they would, if that makes sense. So like, for example, narcissistically or abusive people, it's all about, power and control. So you have to think of it from a standpoint of, how do I get myself out of this situation in the safest way possible that is going to protect me? But also, what you have to understand is that I'm not saying, protect the abuser by any means, no. But I think understanding that certain things can lead to the escalation of the abuser is extremely important. One of those things is exposing the abuser. Like that woman who, contacted the police and everything. It's not that was wrong of her to do. It's just that one thing that survivors of abuse need to understand is that abusive people, like I said, they already have an issue with control and power, which is why they're abusing you to begin with. They already feel powerless. And so involving the cops and putting the abuser in a position where they feel even more powerless is going to escalate. It's going to make them escalate. And so that doesn't mean you don't involve the cops necessarily. It just means keeping that in mind and recognizing that that may not be the end all be all or the best route to go. Same thing goes for this PPO shit. Getting a PPO can sometimes lead to an abuser escalating because, again, they don't like boundaries. They don't respect or listen to boundaries. So on top of it, possibly leading to them escalating further, it more than likely is not going to do shit because my whole thing about PPOs is it's stupid because you're talking about somebody that's the problem in and of itself, is that they have such serious control and power issues that they don't respect boundaries and they don't care about boundaries. A PPO is a boundary. So if this abusive person already has crossed over every single boundary, which they do, that a survivor has, what makes you think that a PPO is going to stop them? What makes you think that a PPO is going to do anything? In fact, it may lead to an abuser escalating because it may lead them to feeling more powerless, which may, like I said, enrage them. And then, I'll show you this video in a second, but a piece of paper doesn't stop anyone. So it may just irritate the abusive person even more and push them to going to further lengths to reestablish and maintain that sense of power and control over the victim or the survivor. So that's why, really, from my perspective, I think the best way to handle getting away from an abuser is, if you can help it, doing it in the quietest, most peaceful manner possible. I think the other thing is, I think about Patrice Wilson, and I think she attempted to do this. She was basically just disconnecting herself, disconnecting from this ex. He was showing up at her house, leaving shit on her doorstep, and she was ignoring it. That led to him becoming enraged, and he escalated further because it was leaving him feeling powerless because she wasn't accepting the gifts and she would just leave them on the porch. Nothing wrong with that. She was just trying to, set a boundary and protect herself. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that getting inside the head of the abuser is important, because if you can understand the way that they think, you can kind of manipulate them at their own game, if that makes sense. So it's important to understand the way they think, because if you understand how they think, you can kind of find ways to protect yourself by basically using their own tactics against them, if that makes sense, or being manipulative in return as a means to protect them. So for example, the abuser's dropping shit off on your doorstep. Just take the shit. Now, some people might say, well, that could give them false hope. No. That neutralizes and keeps the abuser at bay, because it throws them off and leaves them thinking that, oh, maybe I do have a chance. And so it leaves them feeling like, okay, maybe I do have some power in this situation still. Maybe I do still have some control over this situation, which keeps them from escalating further. So it's not that you take the gifts because you actually want to be with this person or whatever. The objective is to throw the abuser off so that you're basically pretending and giving them this illusion that they have power so that you can protect yourself, if that makes sense. So if you take the gifts, again, it makes the abuser think, oh, okay, well, maybe I still do have some control and power here, which again leaves them in a position where they're not as apt to escalate, because the reason abusers escalate is because they feel like they're losing power and control. So you want to throw an abuser off by basically beating them at their own game, by manipulating them back. It doesn't mean that you're actually wanting to be with this person, but you want to do that, and then you want to find a way to move away from the abusive person, and do not tell them you're moving, and B, do not tell them where you're moving at all. So that's another thing. You kind of want to just like be like a thief in the night and just disappear when you're talking about leaving an abuser. It really is not going to be beneficial to get a PPO. It doesn't stop them. They don't give a fuck. Because again, we're talking about people with serious power and control issues, and people, abusers have absolutely no boundaries. They don't give a fuck about your boundaries. And a PPO is just another boundary, which actually might irritate the abuser more, like I said, because boundaries leave an abuser feeling like, oh, you're trying to control me. You're trying to, control me. So it's like it might make them escalate further. That's another thing to keep in mind. Let me think. Okay, let me play this video.
Yet another violent attack on a woman outside her workplace. It is again raising questions about what feels like an epidemic of intimate partner violence in Metro Detroit.
Now, we know domestic violence is prevalent everywhere, but in May alone, we covered the murders of at least 3 women, all allegedly killed.
That's Patrice Wilson.
By their exes. Each one, according to police, targeted, hunted down, and eventually shot to death.
According to the Michigan Uniform Crime Code, over 100 domestic violence-related homicides happen in Michigan every year. And 1 out of 4 women will be abused by a current or former partner at one point in their lives.
One of the tools used by law enforcement to help keep victims of domestic violence safe is a personal protection order. But as we saw in Saline today, they don't guarantee someone's safety.
Jacqueline Francis joins us now with a closer look at what survivors are saying needs to change. Jacqueline.
Talking with the survivor gave some much-needed perspective on what it's like to be in their shoes. I asked her about personal protection orders. Here's what she had to say.
I'm going to hold this piece of paper up to you and say, leave me alone, and you got a gun and you out of your mind right now and you just pull the trigger. What's that piece of paper going to do?
Jasmine Bearmore is a domestic violence survivor, now an advocate for the cause. She talks about the barriers for getting a personal protection order.
The whole process is discouraging. Everything is a system. It's a system. It's a system. All this red tape is in place for everything. And I don't have time to deal with your red tape in your system when my life is on the line.
Today, it was a 40-year-old woman whose life was on the line in Saline. She was walking to her car on break from work when police say her ex-boyfriend opened fire. The woman later died at the hospital, and her co-worker, who was also shot, is in stable condition. Police say the woman had a personal protection order against her ex, but in this case, it wasn't enough.
Just to be candid.
So in this case, again, what you have to understand is that personal protection order may have actually been what led to further violence, and that's why it's important, like I said, to get inside the mind of the abuser. Don't let them know anything. Lie if you have to, keep shit a secret, don't tell them your plans, and like I said, do what it takes to throw them off, which would include, in my personal opinion, not getting a personal protection order, because that lets the abuser know, oh, hey, I'm losing power and control, and so therefore I need to go do something to get it back. And that's why personal protection orders do not work, because abusive people don't give a shit about boundaries. That to them, a PPO to an abuser is basically like a challenge. Oh, you're going to get a PPO against me? Okay, I'll show you who's in charge.
A PPO, a court order, they're not perfect, right?
By the way, this guy has no clue what he's talking about, but...
They don't always prevent harm from occurring tragically.
Even so, the Washtenaw County prosecutor strongly encourages people to get a PPO if they feel threatened, calling it an extra layer of protection.
Getting that PPO in place really provides both the court order that says that somebody needs to stay away from it, somebody needs to cease the contact that was concerning, but it also gives law enforcement more tools because if somebody does violate, they can be brought in on that criminal charge depending on the circumstances.
Okay, this is bullshit. Don't listen to this guy because, like I said, if you know anything about abusers and domestic violence, this is not an extra layer of protection. It actually, I think, puts survivors in a more vulnerable position because what this guy is not understanding is that, again, from the perspective and the mindset of an abuser, getting a PPO is not going to make them think, oh man, I should stay away from this person. We're talking about somebody who has boundary issues and serious power and control issues. A PPO is a challenge to their power and their authority, and therefore it's more than likely only going to lead to someone escalating further and saying, okay, I need to go reinstate and reinforce that I'm still in control here. So I would not recommend, personally, getting a PPO. I would recommend, like I said, getting inside the mind of this person. And as a survivor, as somebody who's been with that person, you know that person better than anybody else. So follow your intuition. You know, because you've been with this abusive person, what makes them tick, what might trigger them, how they might react to certain things. And you need to trust that and take the steps to protect yourself accordingly. Because the other thing that this guy said is, oh, it allows law enforcement, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't fucking matter. Whether you have a PPO or not, if you call law enforcement and say you're getting the shit beat out of you, they're going to assist you. A PPO doesn't do shit. I mean, it doesn't. It's like, it doesn't matter either way. So I think really, in reality, a PPO could actually put your life in